The Victorian Father Mannequin was on the floor when I reached Hall 3B. That wasn't right. I'd helped set up the Christmas exhibit yesterday. He'd been standing by the tree, one hand resting on the boy's shoulder. Perfect family tableau, frozen in 1888. Now he was sprawled on his back, wax hands clutching his throat, face twisted in agony I didn't remember from setup. I stopped at the display's edge, flashlight beam steady despite the tremor in my hands. 6 years as a security guard had taught me to control that much at least, even when my brain was screaming that something was very wrong. The air near the display felt different, colder, and there was a smell, faint but distinct, not the usual museum scent, something organic, like meat left too long in a freezer. The detail was too realistic, the bulging eyes, the mouth frozen mid-scream. The curator hadn't mentioned animatronic features. These were supposed to be simple display mannequins, fiberglass, wax, paint, static. I keyed my radio, called down to the main desk. Static, dead air, then nothing. The radios had been working fine 20 minutes ago. That's when I noticed the placard had changed. Or maybe I'd never read it completely during setup. The small brass plate beside the display now read, Christmas 1888, Whitmore family of Boston. Father poisoned with arsenic and Christmas pudding. Died while children watched. My skin went cold. That level of detail hadn't been there yesterday. I would have remembered died while children watched. That's not the kind of thing you put in a family-friendly museum exhibit. Dr. Brennan had been insistent about the placards during setup. Had written them himself, he'd said. Wanted to make sure the historical details were accurate. He'd told me authenticity matters, that people needed to understand these weren't just displays. These were real people, real tragedies. The way he'd said it, reverent and almost loving, had seemed odd at the time. The air smelled wrong too. Not the usual museum scent of old wood and climate control. Something else underneath. Sweet and chemical, like formaldehyde mixed with candle wax. And the temperature had dropped further. My breath came out in small white clouds. This was California in December. The heating should have been on. I tried the radio again. Nothing. My phone then. 3 bars, should be fine. The call wouldn't connect. Not to the main desk, not to 911, not to anyone. That's when I heard crying. A child's voice, distant but clear, coming from around the corner, from the 1950s display. Every instinct I had screamed at me to leave. Walk down the stairs, exit the building, call the police from my car, let someone else handle whatever was happening on the 3rd floor. But I dropped out of police academy 6 years ago because I couldn't handle pressure, couldn't keep my hands steady when it mattered. The instructor had called it a physiological limitation. I'd called it cowardice, and I'd been running from confrontation ever since. Maybe that's why I went toward the crying instead of away from it. My watch read 3:33 a.m. when I pushed through the doors into the next hall. The 1950s display came into view as I rounded the corner. The mother mannequin who'd been reaching for a tree ornament during setup now knelt on the floor. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose. She clutched something against her chest, a wrapped present torn open, revealing something small and dark inside. The boy mannequin stood in the corner, face turned toward the wall, but his shoulders were moving, up and down, making those crying sounds. My brain tried to rationalize it, mechanical malfunction, some automated feature I didn't know about. Maybe the curator had installed sound systems, motion sensors, something to make the displays more interactive. Except mannequins don't have motors. They don't move at all. The boy's head turned, not swaying, not falling, turning, deliberate and slow, joints creaking like a door on rusty hinges. But there were no hinges, no mechanical parts. I'd been here during setup. These were solid fiberglass forms. His face came into view. The detail was impossible. Real tears on his cheeks, wet and glistening. His eyes tracked me as his head completed its rotation. When had the curator added that level of realism? And why were the tears wet? His mouth moved, forming words without sound at first, then a whisper that carried across the space between us. He told me to read it. He pointed at the placard with one stiff arm. I didn't want to look, didn't want to read whatever had been written there, but my eyes dropped to the brass plate anyway. Christmas 1955, the Morrison household. Mother died of coronary failure upon discovering son's Christmas gift, a dead bird he'd killed and wrapped. Boy's first sign of what doctors would later identify as severe psychological disturbance. The temperature dropped further. I could see my breath in thick white clouds now, each exhalation hanging in the air. The lights in the hallway flickered. Not like a power issue, more like something was passing under them, blocking the light for just a moment. I heard footsteps behind me, multiple sets. The sound wasn't quite right. Not the click of shoes on tile, but something softer, dragging, the sound of stiff joints moving after years of stillness. When I turned, all 3 Victorian children stood between me and the exit. They'd been positioned around the Christmas tree during setup. Now they formed a line blocking the hallway, their wax faces turned toward me. The youngest, a girl maybe 5 years old, opened her mouth. A voice came out, hollow and distant, like it was being played through old speakers buried in her chest. She recited the words from their placard, Whitmore children, ages 5, 8, and 11. Watched their father die. Mother institutionalized 3 days later. Children separated, sent to orphanages. None lived past age 20. The middle child stepped forward. Not walking exactly, more like gliding, feet barely touching the floor. Her mouth moved, but the voice seemed to come from somewhere else. They didn't understand why father was clutching his throat, she said, why his face turned purple. Mother kept screaming, wouldn't stop screaming. I backed away. My flashlight swung wildly between the advancing Victorian children and the 1950s displays behind me. The boy mannequin had turned fully around now, facing me with those impossible tears still wet on his cheeks. More movement caught my eye. The Victorian father was standing up, rising from the floor with mechanical precision, limbs straightening one joint at a time. The hands came away from his throat. The agonized expression remained. My radio crackled. A voice came through, male, rough, speaking words I couldn't understand. Not English, German maybe. The World War I soldiers. They were moving too. I was about to discover the truth. I ran. Didn't think. Just moved. Toward the stairs. Toward escape. Toward anywhere but this nightmare hallway full of moving mannequins and Christmas tragedies. But the corridor stretched longer than it should have. The exit sign that marked the stairwell seemed to recede with every step, like I was running on a treadmill. The museum was rearranging itself around me. More displays appeared that I hadn't noticed during setup. Decades of Christmas tragedies, hangings, shootings, overdoses, all of them moving, all of them dead. I finally reached the stairwell door. My badge should have unlocked it automatically. Should have. The electronic mechanism stayed dark, unresponsive. I slammed my shoulder into the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The lock didn't budge. My phone. Why hadn't I tried my phone again? I yanked it from my pocket. Still 3 bars, still no signal that actually worked. I tried 911 anyway, knowing it would fail. The call failed. Behind me, footsteps, getting closer. That dragging, sliding sound of mannequins in motion. The fire extinguisher. There, mounted on the wall 10 feet away. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. I'd never been in a real fight, avoided confrontation my whole life. But something about the mannequins' hollow eyes, their mechanical movements, it triggered something primal in me, fight or flight. For once, I chose fight. I ripped the extinguisher from its bracket and spun around. The Victorian children had rounded the corner, followed by the 1950s mother, the World War I soldiers, all of them converging. I raised the extinguisher, shouted for them to stay back. The middle Victorian child tilted her head. That same mechanical precision, joints creaking. She told me I couldn't hurt them. They were already dead. She knew my name. Used it. How did she know my name? I swung anyway, connected with her shoulder. She stumbled back but didn't fall, didn't break, just regained her balance and kept advancing. The Victorian father's voice sounded like wind through dead leaves. He told me they weren't my enemy, that they'd tried to warn the others too. I swung at the 1950s mother. This time the extinguisher passed through her like she was made of smoke. She solidified a second later, unharmed, and reached for me. Her hand on my arm felt wrong. Not plastic smooth like a mannequin should be. There was texture, skin texture, pores, fine hairs. She said I couldn't fight them. They weren't really there, not in the way I thought. My voice cracked when I asked what they were. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the extinguisher. The Victorian father's wax fingers, no, not entirely wax, something else, something that had been human once, closed gently on my shoulder. He explained that they were what remains. The curator uses real items for authenticity, he said. Hair, clothing, personal effects, sometimes more than that. The 1950s mother nodded. He preserves them, she told me, mixes their remains with the wax. They're part of the displays now, and every night at 3:33 a.m., they wake up. 17 minutes. That's all they get before they freeze again and reenact their deaths. 17 minutes to move, to remember being human, to try to warn the next one. It's never enough. My chest tightened, not fear, something physical, real pressure building behind my sternum. I asked what they were warning me about. The teenage boy appeared beside the others. He asked if I'd drunk the coffee tonight. I had. Dr. Brennan had brought it up from the break room earlier, right before he left for the evening. Said he'd made a fresh pot since I'd be here alone on Christmas Eve. I'd thought it was considerate. Had mentioned it tasted bitter, but he'd said the machine needed cleaning. He'd watched me drink it, with that thin, satisfied smile he'd had during the entire exhibit setup. Oh, God. The pressure in my chest intensified, radiating down my left arm now, into my jaw. Classic heart attack symptoms, but I was 34. I ran 3 times a week. My last physical was clean. This didn't make sense unless... The Victorian father confirmed what I was thinking. Heart attack medication mixed into the coffee, enough to mimic a coronary event. Clean, untraceable, happens every year on Christmas Eve. I couldn't breathe. The museum tilted sideways, or maybe I was falling. My legs wouldn't hold me. The fire extinguisher clattered to the floor. The 1950s mother urged me to purge it, make myself vomit. Now, before it was too late. I tried to move toward the bathroom. My legs wouldn't cooperate. The world was going dark at the edges, tunnel vision closing in. I managed 3 steps before my knees buckled. I gasped something about the basement. evidence, his office. The Victorian father knelt beside me as I collapsed. He told me they knew. They'd always known, but they couldn't leave the third floor. They were bound to their displays. And the curator was very careful. Destroyed evidence. Rebuilt if there was damage. He always won. The teenage boy crouched down, his young face full of ancient grief. I was the fifth, he said. There was a new contemporary display every Christmas, security guard who died on duty, 2024. The curator had been planning my position, taking measurements, getting my uniform size. The pressure in my chest was unbearable, a crushing weight that made every breath impossible. I thought about my sister in Connecticut. Third year in a row, I'd turned down her invitation. She'd wonder why I didn't call on Christmas. It would take her days to realize something was wrong. The floor was cold against my cheek. The mannequins gathered around me, their faces sad and sympathetic. Not evil, not malicious, just trapped, like I was about to be. The Victorian father whispered that he was sorry. The darkness took me. When I opened my eyes, I was standing. My arm was raised, hand reaching for the stairwell door handle. The exact position I'd been in when I first tried to escape. But I couldn't move, couldn't lower my arm, couldn't turn my head. My body was frozen, locked into position like a mannequin. No, this wasn't possible. This wasn't happening. But I could feel it, the wrongness. My skin felt stiff, waxy. My joints wouldn't bend. I tried to scream, but my throat wouldn't work. My mouth wouldn't open. I was trapped inside this shell, aware but unable to move, unable to do anything. I heard footsteps on the stairs, a key in the lock, not the electronic system, a manual override. The door opened. Dr. Brennan stepped through. He looked at me and smiled. Not surprised, not concerned, satisfied. That same thin smile he'd had when he watched me drink the coffee. He checked his watch, said something about being right on schedule. 3:33 a.m. The medication works faster each year, he said. He'd refined the dosage. I tried to speak, tried to scream, tried to do anything. Nothing. My body wouldn't respond. Only my eyes could move, tracking him as he circled around me. He pulled out his phone and started taking photographs. Different angles, documenting the fear in my eyes because I could feel my eyes, could feel them showing my terror. The way my hand was frozen, reaching for escape, the position of my body. He murmured that it was perfect. The desperation was evident. The realism would be remarkable. He touched my face, adjusting something. His fingers felt cold against my cheek. He said he'd gotten quite good at preserving the expression. The key was catching them right at the moment of death. Maximum fear, maximum authenticity. He stepped back, made a phone call. I heard him report a tragic incident to someone, requesting emergency services, playing the concerned employer who just discovered his security guard had died of a heart attack on duty. Terrible tragedy. Right before Christmas, too. He talked for several minutes, his voice full of false sympathy. All the while, he kept one eye on me, making sure I heard every word, making sure I understood. When he ended the call, he returned to adjust my position, moved my arm slightly, angling it more artistically. The same obsessive precision I'd seen during exhibit setup. He'd spent 20 minutes getting the Victorian father's hand positioned exactly right on the boy's shoulder. The details matter, he'd said then. Everything must be perfect. Now he was positioning me with that same meticulous care. He said I'd make an excellent addition to the contemporary collection. Security guard, died on duty. The contrast would be interesting, showing how workplace safety had evolved, or failed to evolve. He was thinking he'd position me right here by the stairwell. Reaching for escape I never quite achieved, he took one final photograph and smiled. "Excellent work," he said. The fear in the eyes came out particularly well. "Best one yet." Then he left. I heard his footsteps descending the stairs, heard the stairwell door close and lock behind him. I stood there, frozen, my arm extended toward the door handle I'd never reach. My face locked in an expression of terror I could feel but not change. The Victorian father appeared at the edge of my vision. He didn't speak, didn't need to. I understood now. I was part of the collection, part of the exhibit. Contemporary Security Guard 2024. Died on duty Christmas Eve. Through the windows I could see dawn light beginning to filter across the city. Christmas morning. In a few hours, families would arrive. Children would press their faces against the glass, marveling at how realistic the displays looked, how realistic I looked. The Victorian father's voice reached me, barely audible. "At 3:33 tomorrow morning, I'd move again," he said. 17 minutes. Then I'd freeze and reenact my death. Every night, forever. The mannequins returned to their positions as the light grew stronger. The Victorian children by their tree, the 1950s family in their living room, the World War I soldiers in their trench, all of them frozen again, waiting for nightfall, waiting for 3:33 a.m., waiting like I was waiting now. The Victorian father was the last to return to his display. Before he positioned himself on the floor, hands clutching throat, face twisted in agony, he looked at me one more time. "Next year," he whispered, "another guard, another Christmas." They'd try to warn them too. Then he fell to the floor and froze, becoming wax and fiber and preserved remains again. I stood alone in the hallway, my arms still reaching, my eyes the only part of me that could move, watching the light grow brighter through the windows. Soon, the museum would open. Children would press their faces against the glass, marveling at how realistic I looked. At 3:33 a.m. tomorrow, I would move again.